Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to another edition of Power BI Dev Camp. Today's topic is bringing Power BI into the Dataverse through the magic of Synapse. We have a guest presenter today, Scott Sewell, but I'm going to hand it over first to Ted Pattison to introduce our speaker. Ted, good morning. How's it going?
It's going great. I hope everyone's doing well today. I am very pleased that we have a guest speaker who really knows his area. I work on the Power BI CAT team, and there's a lot of different people that specialize in different areas. And Scott's mission in life these days is just kind of figuring out the Power Platform and Dataverse and how it relates to Power BI, then back again. So he said he wanted to do this session a couple months ago. He doesn't do a session unless he's very passionate about the topic and is ready to dive in. So I'm very excited to hand things over and let Scott tell us about, how we're going to use this new Synapse Link functionality, to basically bridge Power BI and Dataverse. Mr. Sewell.
Hey, sounds good. Ted, how are you? Thank you for the invite back to Dev Camp. And this is great because it's a really an interesting problem or challenge that we're kind of faced with, an opportunity to really expand. If you're a Power BI data professional, there's a lot of opportunity to help the growing number of people within your organization who are using the Power Platform to take advantage of that data that they have. There is, this growing. If you watch the earnings report yesterday or day before yesterday with Satya, there was just this growth in terms of people on this platform. They're taking advantage of it because it's so quick to adapt to real simple business problems or complicated business problems with this data platform we call Dataverse. The challenge or the opportunity therein is that Dataverse data, if you just leave it sitting in Dataverse, has a certain amount of value. But when you bring the power of analytics and data on, like Power BI and other tools on top of it, it can really explode. And so as a data professional, you've got this tremendous opportunity to make a huge impact inside your organization. And that's really what I want to talk about today is this new feature we have. I say new, but it's been around since 2020. It's new to a lot of people, called the Synapse Data Link. We'll talk about it and dive in deeper into what's involved with it and how you can set it up and why you need it, and just give you some insights into what's going on there. Sound good?
That sounds exciting. Let's get on with the show, buddy.
Yeah, man. Well, let me, if we want to go to my screen, I went ahead and I figured, since this is Dev Camp, I figured I'd go ahead and start off with you and me and Dev Camp. Does that look about right, you think, Ted? I think you're a little, you're a little taller than I am. That's good. But again, it's really that idea of bringing Dataverse to Power BI, and that's what we're really going to talk about. So we'll talk about kind of a quick agenda here about what is it, what are we talking about, how do you use it, and then show you some tools that you'll be able to access later. I'll give you some links in the process, and then I think we can grab those links later on and put it in the toolbar. So here's what, let's talk about what is this thing, Synapse Link for Dataverse. And probably the hardest part is deciding whether it's Synapse or Synapse. I'm going to go with Synapse. Maybe it's just my Tennessee accent, but I'm going to go with Synapse. And we're going to talk about the
Mississippi. You are.
Right. We're going to talk about how these tools work together and why you use them. So, high level, what is it? It's just a way of getting data coming from Dataverse and bringing it out into the Synapse Analytics platform so that you can then run Power BI against that data, or use, you can then, or even better yet, enrich it with machine learning, or spin it out into additional tools that are there. It can be a combination. It can be just Dataverse data, or you can supplement it with data from other parts of the organization, sort of pointing to those other pieces of the organization, bringing that data together so you can deliver really solid reports and analytics across that data. It is a continuous replication that you set up. It's just a handful of clicks, and we'll go through that. Handful of clicks to set it up, and get the data flowing out of Dataverse and into Synapse. Now I'm saying it backwards. It's a one. This says one click. That's probably a little bit of a marketecture. It's really a handful of clicks that you get it to set it over and move it in place. And the data, as you make changes, as the Dataverse team makes changes to the data that's in Dataverse, like adding new fields, if they expand a field or make it drop a field, all that metadata change will flow into the serverless pool that you can then report off of. So it's a very clean and quick way of setting this up. Probably backing up from that is why would you bother doing this? Why can't we just report against Dataverse directly? Well, you can, but when you report against Dataverse directly, you're going through a lot of layers of security, a lot of layers of metadata, a lot of layers of things that are happening in the middle of that. And so if you're looking at high volumes of data, this approach by moving it out of Dataverse and into Synapse so that we can then report off it, that's the approach to go with. So this is really focused on that very large data sizes, hundreds of thousands or millions or bazillions of records. This is the approach to go with. So what is it? What are we talking about? How does it piece together? This is an example. Here's a way I've tried to visualize this so you can kind of see what's going on. Over on the left, we've got the Synapse Link for Dataverse. And that is just a feature of Dataverse that you click on and turn it on. When you turn it on, what it's going to ask you for is the name of a data lake storage. So it's going to be storing this data out into the data lake. And then it'll also optionally ask you for a Synapse workspace. And the Synapse workspace is going to look at the data in the data lake and combine that with metadata coming in from Dataverse to give you a serverless experience where you can query that data as if it's sitting in a serverless database for yourself. So that point, I can pull it into Power BI. So that's really the simplest view of it, is really the Synapse Link for Dataverse writes data down into the data lake, and the Azure Synapse workspace sits on top of that and can query that data that's in the data lake as if it was a SQL database, and then give you those views and report off of it. Ted, does that make sense? Is that any questions about that? Do you think that's a clear explanation of that?
I didn't understand it until you just went through that.
I'll take that as acknowledgement that yes, that is a brilliant explanation, right? So what is it? What do we have going on here? It's really an effort by the team to democratize the data that's in Dataverse and set it up for advanced analytics, and giving you a chance to get really fast insights off of it through the Synapse Analytics platform and around the additional pieces under Synapse. Now, one caveat, let me throw this caveat out up front. When I look at, if you go online and say, show me what Synapse is, Synapse is a lot of products. There's a lot of things going on inside of Synapse. We're really talking about, in this case, primarily just the serverless SQL experience in Synapse. So it's a very narrow use case within Synapse. Synapse has a lot more features that we'll save for another day, but we're really talking about that serverless experience that allows us to set up what looks like a SQL server, but instead of having data sitting in SQL tables, data sitting out in the data lake that I can read from. So it's like currently it's just CSV files. Future case, we're going to have some other things like Parquet files, but currently it just gives you that ability to read those CSV files as if they were a server, SQL server, by including both the data that's in there as well as a lot of metadata that's being pulled in from Dataverse, combining that to make it a really easy experience. So it's that single end-to-end way to work with the data coming out of Dataverse that you can then supplement with AI and machine learning type things. It'll be beyond the scope of today's conversation, but allows you to take that data out, enrich it, and then report on it. And then even subsequently, you can take that enriched data and feed it back into Dataverse to enrich the data there. We're seeing that with customers who are pulling the data out, running enrichment across it, and then updating scores or updating profiles within Dataverse to reflect all the data they've been able to enrich from outside of it. A couple of new features that are happening right now. And we're going to dig deeper into this, but I want to kind of flag these just to let you know that they are there. If you tried using Dataverse, this Azure Synapse Link, we'll say 3 months ago, one of the challenges that you ran into was the idea of being able to connect Dataverse choice options. So if you're familiar with Dataverse, if you have a pick list of industry codes, so you've got medical and dental and technical or whatever, those labels are stored in the metadata inside of Dataverse, and in the table itself is just a numeric enum, just an integer value that says 1 2 3 equals medical. That's just a numeric value. When the original version, when you brought it out, you would just see that numeric value, and you have to work through going and getting the labels and adjoining them. Recently, that has been a big improvement, because now we have those choice labels brought out into a view inside this table. So that's a new feature that, again, if you haven't worked with it in the last couple of months, you may not haven't seen that, but it is a game changer in terms of making it super easy to consume this. You're seeing now starting to move in the ability to move this transport layer through the solutions, and you're going to see more of that, where you can take this configuration and move it over into solutions, so that you can have a dev and a dev test prod, etc., set up and move from organization to organization through a solution, which is very nice. Finally, on the third one, the Parquet and Delta Lake format, that's a coming soon feature. But last I'd heard from the team, coming soon means actually soon, not just theoretically soon. So I would keep your eyes on the blog over the next, we'll just theoretically say, a couple of months. But somewhere in there, we're going to start seeing more information about this, and you will be able to, probably there'll be a preview set up, but I'm not sure exactly the timing on that. But keep your eyes open if you're interested in Parquet format and other pieces there. So that's a piece. What do we have built into it right now? It's a ready run experience. Data ingestion, prep, machine learning, all that's in place. I'm going to focus primarily on the SQL side of it, reading it from SQL. I'm going to focus on that, but remember, this is not limited to just what I'm going to show you today. You can go way beyond this depending on what your use case is. You can use Synapse pipelines to start moving data around, or the Spark. If you're a Spark fan, the ready run Spark experience is there as well. So let's take a look at it. I have a link here to the Azure Synapse Link Power Apps documentation, but if you just type in Azure Synapse Link Power Apps, you'll get it. We'll get it out, but I'll be happy to share that with you. So, one other piece that I probably really should have put up front is this idea of the legacy tool that the team has been using. The people on the Dataverse teams have been using a legacy tool that goes back, man, it probably goes back 6 or 8 years, maybe. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly when it came out, as this idea of the data export service. And what that allowed you to do, this is a legacy experience, is it allowed you to spin up a SQL server in Azure. And that once it was set up inside the environment, you had a SQL server, you can install a solution that would set up this replication service. And you'd set up key vaults and a lot of pieces there, and they would talk to each other, and it would start moving the data over from Dataverse into an Azure SQL database that you had loaded, just a regular one. You spun it up and paid the $300 a month or whatever you paid for it to spin it up and have that data out there. Thousands of customers are using this. Thousands have been using this for a long time. It's been sitting in environments for a while. and really being used as a source of data for other services, other pieces, reporting, analytics, those kind of things. Some other people have gotten creative with it, but it's really this idea of a data export service. It's been in place, but effective back in November last year. It was marked as deprecated, and I think if you check now, you can no longer set up a new environment with it. So it is actually end of life, and the end of life is scheduled for November of this year. So there'll be people with hair on fire here coming in a few months. But if you want to get ahead of that, this is the approach that replaces the data export service. This is a tool. There is a lot of information about how to move off the data export service and over onto the this Synapse experience. And you can go to the AKA links that I have here, the DS deprecation blog, as well as the deprecation playbook. The deprecation playbook is a huge resource of great scenarios that describe all the pieces that are in place that say, how do I move off this legacy experience and over to Azure Synapse? That will be the Synapse data link that is the replacement for that. So that is a great feature to be available. So let's look at it again. So we saw this earlier. The Azure Synapse writes out to the data lake and stores it currently in CSV files. We'll be moving over to Parquet as an option coming up. And that then is available through the Synapse Analytics tool to be able to read that and query it just like it was a SQL database, which can be then brought into Power BI and be able to query data at scale, at very large scales. So you can do that. You can do it from Synapse Data Link directly. It works fine that way. I actually have a slight hint or a trick that I have applied that makes it a little bit easier, I think. And that is coming up. I'll show it to you in a minute. So let's talk about how do you set it up. I think, let me see if I've got my environment handy here. Let me go over to this. Okay, so I'm gonna pull this in front for just a minute, and then I'll kind of go back to my slide and just show you what I'm talking about. So right up here, we're gonna go to the how to get to setting up the Azure Synapse Link, and we're gonna go from the Power Apps. We're gonna go over into the Maker experience, make.powerapps.com. If I go into the Maker experience, if I look over on the left side and I see the Dataverse layer. By the way, this, if you're not familiar with Dataverse and Power Apps, this is just the experience that you go into if you're going to configure Dataverse to do your bidding about whatever project you're working on. And inside of Dataverse, I've got my tables. And again, these are all this really rich metadata configured tables. And I can see, like, if I wanted to go, I think this one has contacts in it. So I'll go to the contact table. And here's my, it's going to read that and say, here's my contacts, passengers, and crew. This is the data set of the Titanic. So it's got a hand, data there, and I can go in and create new columns through this this schema UI. So there's a lot of features inside of this that allow you to build out effectively a database without actually touching the data, the SQL database directly. So that's why it's so powerfully from taking hold of organizations in the low code, no code experience. They can build up these apps inside of Dataverse very quickly and take advantage of some stuff that previously required that spin up a big project with a more experienced team. So we've got the data types in here, but now if you look over on the left side, I've got my Azure Synapse Link option here. So just right inside of the Maker experience, I go to the Azure Synapse Link, and that is my configuration jumping off point that I'll go into and create this. If you'll notice, I've already got one created, but I'll show you what the new link looks like. Click on New Link. And now the first thing is I'm going to tell it, it says, your environment is in East US. And so you do need to configure your storage in an environment that's compatible with your Dataverse environment. So it'll prompt you saying, if you're in Europe, you've got these locations. I'm in the East US and the East US environment, so I need to make sure that I have my storage set up in one of those locations. So let me jump into Synapse where am I going? I'm going over to Azure, Azure portal. Jump into the Azure portal here real quickly and point out where I went ahead and set up these environments. Okay, I'm gonna have to, yeah, there we go. Yeah, so in my my environment, I went ahead and created a storage account like this, created a storage account, and then also created a Synapse workspace. And in both those cases, that allowed me to create, I went ahead and set these up in my subscription. I followed the steps. There is one hint in here that I need to make sure that you pay attention to. Once you get through this, it's going to ask you for all the information. Let's see if it'll let me show you the next one. There is this option. This one's not set by default, but you'll want to make sure that you enable hierarchical namespaces in your Azure storage location. So that's a little hint to be aware of. All the documentation walking you through it is listed. I just went through the documentation again this weekend just to refresh myself, and it's easy peasy. You can set that up. So once I've set that storage up, I'll go ahead and tell it which resource group and I'm working with, which in this case is my Titanic, and I have only one storage account set up in Titanic. But in my case, I also want to go ahead and click on the connect to the Synapse workspace, and I've pre-created a workspace called Titanic Store. And this is a Synapse workspace called Titanic Store and a storage account called Titanic Store. So not confusing at all. But those two are set up so that I can connect with both of those. Once I've done this, I'll go through the process of hitting next, and then the next step is going to ask me to add tables to it. I'm going to hit cancel here because I'm not going to set that one up a second time, but I'll go in here and go to manage tables and show you what the add table experience looks like. So in this case, you're going to see a list of all the data tables coming out of the Dataverse environment. And it's a whole long list of it. You'll notice that I have a handful of them that I've checked because I want those to be the ones that are syncing over. And I can, pick other ones and then hit save. Couple of options that you have in place here. You can do that, and if you do that by the default, all your major tables will come over as overwrite, meaning that if I have a record that it's a contact record for Alex Powers, and Alex Powers adds a new phone number to his contact record, then he will add it in Dataverse, and that will sync out and overwrite the existing row in the CSV file for Alex Powers. It's going to overwrite that and replace it and add the new phone number. That's the default experience. We have a second experience that's a little more challenging to use, but it adds some pretty cool features to it. So if I choose the advanced setting configuration here and open that one up, I have the ability to set up append only. Now, append only is a feature that allows us to, as Alex updates his phone number, it's going to, instead of overwriting the existing Alex Powers record, it's going to create a new one inside the storage link. I mean, there's still only one record in Dataverse, but it's going to create a new one inside storage that has this new phone number. But I could use that as sort of a slowly changing dimensions. I can use that data. And if you've written queries against slowly changing dimensions, you know how much fun that is. But you can build up a history of data over time. That's really useful for things like sales, where we're watching a sales opportunity move forward and change over time, and you want to build a machine learning against that to say, if an opportunity starts out really, really big and gets small over time, is it a consistent behavior within a particular type of customer or a type of industry or a type of salesperson? Understanding what those are really can create some insights that are completely blind. The people in Dataverse are really unable to see right now. And it's an opportunity for you to step in and be the superhero and bring that data forward. But again, you click the advanced button at the top and say show advanced configuration settings. And then you would just check the append. And that says, okay, instead of overwriting, I'm going to create a new row every time. And I'll want to watch that and say, and keep track of that. I can also do partitioning by month or year, or I think it's, month or year. If I want to partition that, it's a little more advanced beyond the kind of scope of what we're talking about today, but it is available to us. Once I've done that, it's going to start up the process of syncing that data over. And it's going to copy that. Now, by the way, I've got a ridiculously small data set here, just the passengers and crew of Titanic. It's really ridiculously small. This is way overkill for this particular data set, just a FYI. But it's creating this ongoing synchronization that's moving the data over as it rolls, and pulls that data in and starts updating. I'm going to pause here for a second. I just noticed there was a question in the data set about is it linked to Purview? You can link this data once you start pulling it out into Synapse. You can link it to Purview and do take a look at what that data is for further scans and discoverability. It's not being, the Purview is not sitting inside of Dataverse, but it's once you've pulled it out, then you can start pulling that in with Purview and start really attacking that approach. As well as the second question, Barath, the question was, is this Dataverse metadata? So it's same thing for, is it linked to Purview? Yes, you can pull it out and then Purview can then scan it and you can take rules against it, but it's not being, the Purview's not touching Dataverse right now. All right, cool. All right, so let's go on from here.
Can I just jump in?
As I make changes, this is going to be run in place. I have links in this to look at my data lake. I can click here, open up Azure, and go and log in. And once I'm inside my storage, I've got just a link to my storage account. Not really much in here, not very interesting, but it just tells you what I haven't stored in there. More interesting than that is I can click and link to my Synapse workspace. So again, all I do is go here and click on this button to go to my Synapse workspace, and it will fire up a link, and again, prompt me to log in. Let me log into my demo environment here. And now once I'm in Synapse, I can start seeing this data that's being copied over into this environment. And we're going to see it here in the Lake database. Once this kind of walks through that, here's my Lake database. And if you'll notice, I have now this Lake database. It gives it, it's called Dataverse, and then it tells me what the environment name was, Titanic Cruise, without the E. I think it's maximum length of how many characters. And then underneath it, I'll see the tables that are associated with it. And if you notice, I have my contact table and the columns that are associated with it. And these are all the columns from the contact entity all of those are being synced. You sync the entire table. It's a table level sync that we create. And so those are being synced over, and I can do, easily right click and run a SQL script across that, and it's going to query that. And again, it's going out to storage and looking at the CSV file that's sitting in storage and interpreting that with the metadata as if it was a SQL database and letting me run a SQL statement against it. And so it's highly scalable in that you can do massive amounts of data in it. Now, it's not as fast as if you dumped it into a SQL table, but it is a very inexpensive way, a whole lot cheaper than keeping a SQL server sitting there running all the time. But now we're starting to see the data down below. We can see that in place. So really cool that we have that available to us from there. Let's go back a step. I'm going to Alt tab back over to my presentation for a second, because I want to kind of review what we looked at real quickly. And see, we went through the Synapse link and we set that up, and then we manage the tables, and we open the Synapse workspace, and so we can query the data over there. But let me show you a sort of an enhancement that I like to add to it. I've got the pieces that are here, the Synapse to the auto-created views that are created, we just saw. But I like to create some custom views on top of that data. So if you noticed, if you're familiar with the Dataverse schema, it's a lot of tables. There's a whole lot going on in there. There's kids' birthdays and anniversaries and assistants' names and assistants, lots of stuff that's in there, of which I only need a handful of those fields. So in order to create a very lovely landing point for my reports, I want to shape the data that's out there and piece out only what I need. Just make it a lot. It's an easier approach to make this useful for somebody who doesn't want to go through the entire schema of every field that's in every table that I'm syncing. I only want to present to them, here's the tables that we're interested in, here's the fields that our organization is using. These fields can be whatever, a handful of fields. Let's pull them forward, make them available to me in the customer report view, and then use that to then become my source for Dataverse, for my Power BI report. So let me show you what I'm doing in this case. Going back to Synapse, you'll notice here, I've got a SQL database, and let me show you how I created that. All I have to do is hit the plus sign and say I want to create a new SQL database. When I do that, it's going to ask me if I want serverless or dedicated. Now, in my case, I want serverless because I don't want to pay for spinning up a dedicated pool to sit there and hold this data. I'm only using it as a refresh bucket for my reports. So serverless is cool. And I just create a serverless SQL database here. And this is all this does. It doesn't have any tables in it. There's no tables stored in it. All it has is a handful of views, and those views represent the data, sort of the subset of data that I'm interested in. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to script that out into a new table. If you'll notice here, now I've got the top, I've got all my contacts, but I've only limited it to just a handful of, 14 fields that I'm interested in. And once I run that, it'll give me those 14 fields, which are just showing me just the data that's actually useful for the organization. Let me take that top out, since there's only 2,500 or so of these. I'll pull that out. It's going to run the query, retrieve the results. And now if I maximize this window, you can see a little bit of that data down here below, showing contact names, full names, ticket numbers, gender, passenger type IDs, etc. So that data is being pulled out. That's one way of doing it. I can pull that out, and then I can even filter out data that's like inactive records or things that I want to mark as not available for reporting. I can filter that out in my view, and it's all good. Another approach, if you choose to do this, is create a little bit more of a semantic layer. You can do this. I don't know if it's necessarily the best approach, but in this case, I went in and created a semantic view of it. In this case, I did the same thing. I took the same view, but I went ahead and changed all the field names to be the friendlier end user name. If I wanted to make this view directly accessible to an end user, I could do that, make this view available, and it's a lot more user friendly, like front name, gender, etc. It's kind of a toss up. I might probably want to say I would do that in my semantic layer inside the data model and kind of step away from this, but it's a possible way of doing that, just to let you know that that is a feature that is available. But I want to talk about what these views actually look like, because there's a lot going on under the covers that it's important to be aware of. Is how did I create this contact view? So I'm going to go down here into I should be connected already. And here is I'm pointing to that same environment. if you'll notice that I'm pointing to, let me maximize this. See if I can zip that up. Sorry for all the red squigglies. I don't know why it does that, but in this case, I'm looking at that contact view that I have in my Titanic environment. So DBO contacts, and you'll notice I'm pulling back. Here's the fields that I'm looking at, and I'm pulling it back. The source is my the Dataverse Titanic, the lake database view of that. That's my source, and I'm joining in to go get the option set values against all these sets. Option set metadata, global option set, joining it and pulling it together so that I have a friendlier view of this data. So if I just run that, then I have, oops, cancel. I want to go back to there. Clicked on that accidentally. So now I have things like gender code name stored in the database. It's going to be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, how many gender codes you have listed. And it's going, but I'm pulling and going and grabbing the value of the gender code table and joining it here so that I give a friendlier name for those values of my fact table. Same thing for passenger type ID. That's a lookup to another table. In the base table, it does give me that passenger type name, but I might want to go back out and join out to that table to go grab an additional field off that if I need to pull that into my fact table, as opposed to leaving it in a dimension. So a lot of options here that you can pull that together. And that is really that feature that I mentioned earlier that is a new feature that's available. And it's the, let's point it to here, my tables. And that is because we now have the metadata tables in the base fact table. So global option set metadata, option set metadata. If I do a select on that, you'll see what this looks like. And it's just those correlations between both the entity name, the option set name, the option, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 100,000, 200,000. And then it includes a localized label for the language. So 1033 is English, and so it shows me the label for 1033, whatever that is. So in this case, for the address type code, option 1, the localized label is for 1 is default value. And if I do option set address 1, address type code, it's bill2 is the localized label. So really, let's see. I think I see a question here, Daniel. Asking me to move up to the right. Let's see if hopefully that's maybe that's. We'll see if I can.
Oh, you're good now. This is for when you were like on the smaller window, but you're all set
see
now.
If that's better. Is that better? Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah,
okay.
No, you're all set.
But anyway, we get those labels there, and we can see what's going on there in that data. Pull that out and experience that. So it's a really useful approach to be able to query all that data, pull it into a query, and then ultimately what we're going to do is take that same data. See if I make sure I'm on the right page here. Yeah, so here's my example where I create this companion view to hold those custom views. I create that, and I've got my option set labels, pull that in, and then I can take those views and create it for my report. By the way, there was there's a blog post. If you go to my my LinkedIn site, there is one of the guys who wrote, and in fact, because I want to give him credit because he did an amazing job. Let me pull up and go to LinkedIn. Oh, where's my LinkedIn? Because I want to give him credit for it because he did an amazing job. LinkedIn.
Hey Scott, do you mind if I jump
just
a second?
And well, it's asking me to log in here. Give me.
Scott, do you mind if I jump in for just a second?
What he did, LinkedIn. If you go to my page, feed. This is, I should have done this ahead of time, but I want to make sure that I give credit where credit's due here. And okay. And go to mine and go to posts and activities, posts or articles. And here it is. And his name is Slava. Oh, I couldn't remember his name all of a sudden. So his name is Slava. And what he did is he created a tool that will go through and create those views with all the joins to the metadata. And that's available there in this link. And I can share that link with the tab, with the group. So I'm going to copy the link and drop it in the chat window. And Daniel, I think you can probably share that. So terrific. So yeah, so we should be able to see that. But what it does, the cool thing is it goes out and connects the dots so that you have access to all those metadata tables and you have a view with everything included. Now, I will suggest use that query to create it, but then you trim it back down to just the fields that you need. Because if you're joining it, 30 times against the metadata tables when you only need 2 of those values, that's going to slow your query down unnecessarily. So just trim it down, make it nice and clean and tight, and you'll have a much better experience there. Okay, so let's move forward here. Move that over here out of the way. And so here's an example of then now bringing that into Power BI. We can point it to my on-demand views inside of SQL or inside of this Synapse. So let me go back into Synapse and I can show you what that looks like. And let's find it here. There's my Synapse and pull that forward. There it is, finally. Yeah. So in this case now, if I go to this area, I can see that, and I can hit the Manage button. And if I click on Manage and click on my built-in environment, you'll notice over here I've got the workspace endpoint for SQL. I can take that value and use that just like it was a SQL database. And I can then take that and drop it into my Power BI report off of this data. So let me go to Transform Data. And if you look here, once it loads the contact table, hit Advanced Editor, and you'll notice that my SQL database is just that Titanic store .Azure Synapse.net, and that is the location. That's the new SQL database that I created just to hold my views, and that's the view that I created. So really an incredibly easy to experience part where I say point here, go here, and then once I've done that, I get rid of any columns that I don't need, rename the columns, and then I can bring that in as my source for Power BI. Just a really a useful and easy approach to follow from that. And there you can see here's my data coming in from Synapse. Let me pause here for a second. It looks like there was a YouTube question. Let's see, community question. Let's see, for performance, creating index, would it be better move the data to a dedicated pool before querying the serverless SQLs? Querying the serverless SQLs, let's see, Chris. Yeah, I think Chris is the name. The querying the serverless SQLs is because it's going out and reading it out of the data lake. It's not as fast as if you have a dedicated pool. Absolutely, 100%. It's not as fast as a dedicated pool. It also costs a lot less because you're only consuming the data as you pull it out, as opposed to having a pool sitting there and running. So if you need that performance, that higher performance, you can always move this over into a dedicated pool and use the data there And so you can query from there. You can do additional work there to speed that up. So absolutely, if you need to, this is one of those no cliffs experience where we can start off with the serverless and keep moving our way up the food chain to more advanced tools like the dedicated pool, or however it is you want to do that, and move the data in using whatever tool you want to use for the data movement there. So thanks for the great question there to improve that. The second one, I'll see. Curious what the best practices on using a TDS endpoint versus Synapse. Curious, great question. The TDS endpoint is fantastic in the sense that I can point Power BI directly to the TDS endpoint on Dataverse and pull data from there. I can point it directly and pull it through that endpoint, and I don't have to do anything else. The downside is performance and speed. It's designed to be able to add a bunch of layers of security in front of that data so that it filters out which record the person who's interacting with it is allowed to see. So there's a lot of layers there, as well as a lot of joins that are going on in the background for me to pull that data forward. And so as a result, it's really good for data sets where we're dealing with 50,000 records. Yeah, something like that, where that's the user's result set. It could be 10 million records stored in the database back there, but maybe I'm only looking at the sales opportunities I'm working on this quarter. That's going to be a handful of data sets, and that's a nice filtered use case for that TDS endpoint. Very useful for that. I had a case where I had a customer who wanted to filter the reports for each individual user to only the data that they're allowed to see. That was really a great use case for that TDS endpoint that's built into Dataverse. We pointed all the data there. Each person was running a report that was pulling back just a small, just a bite-sized set of that data that they had. Alternatively, that same organization needed to present those same reports to the CEO and to all the leadership, the senior leadership team. If I try to pull the entire data set for the CEO, who already has permission to see everything, through that filter, performance was just too slow for that. That's where we said, let's move it over into Synapse. And so for the reports that were designated to be available to leadership and people who already had permission to see all the data and needed visibility across big, huge chunks of data, we moved it out to Synapse using Synapse Link and made it visible for the reports dedicated to those individuals or that layer of the organization. So really kind of two use cases. One's not, depending on what the use case is, there's definitely a better versus a worse approach on the two use cases, but it depends on what the use case is. So for, again, that narrow space really worked great for the TDS endpoint, but once you move up into larger data sets you need to pull, this is Bob's your uncle on this. Follow-up question. Let's see, lower volume, hierarchical. Yeah, see, Girish, I saw yours. Best ways to move data that polybase, would the best practice be polybase? I'm not going to be able to answer that question. I'm not sure. I don't have enough experience in polybase to be able to kind of give you a great experience. There are lots of places. Again, we're moving that data out into the data lake, and we put that friendly Synapse in front of it. But we have other tools within Synapse, Data Factory, and other tools. There are, in fact, I think there's actually a template in place that will allow you to automatically replicate it into a Dataverse, into a dedicated pool. So there's some options there that are available. It's really going to depend on what your team is cool with. All right. I think that's those are my key questions there. Let me go back to my deck here and let me show you. Let me go back to PowerPoint here. PowerPoint. Yeah, here we go. Yeah. So based on that, now we have the completion of that circuit, the whole circuit going forward. I've got my Azure Synapse Link pulled over here. I've got my auto-created views. It's dropping the data into the data lake. I've got my auto-created views. Then I've created custom report views that then serve up my Power BI report. And if you'll notice, just to, whoops, there it goes. Just to point out, this is a Power BI report that's now been embedded into PowerPoint. So it's a really cool feature that you've got available to us now to be able to engage that data with a person inside of PowerPoint. So unrelated to this particular presentation, but it's cool that we can do that now. So again, that's the sort of the chain of custody of the pipeline of that data to move it through, and it makes it really easy to experience. So finally, let's wrap up with this sort of benefits and considerations. Benefits: you get data moving through. It's only a handful of clicks to get it started and get it rolling. Get the pool, serverless pool. Somewhat works as like a data warehouse, or can work in conjunction with your data warehouse. High volume, complex query, really support nice. Considerations: the data lake is built on an Azure subscription, so it's outside of Dataverse. The date time is being pulled out in UTC format, so be kind of aware of that. If I save an opportunity at 5 o'clock in Seattle on December 31st, the time in Seattle on December 31st at 5 o'clock in Seattle is actually 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in Azure, in Universal Time Code. So if you dealt with databases and time zones, kind of mind-blowing experience at that point, but you deal with that. Once the data is out, by the way, just like I mentioned earlier, once we've pulled the data out of Dataverse, security is your responsibility at that point. There are lots of ways to secure the data in Synapse, but you don't have that fine-grained user rows based off of Dataverse's data model. That Dataverse model of security stays in Dataverse. Now you need to deal with it separately, which you can absolutely do, but you do have to deal with it there. And then if there is a case, I probably should have pointed this out earlier. If you have a environment where the customer is writing to it a lot while you're trying to read it, you can hit some contention. So we have added into this. Sorry for the quick change here, but I want to show you. There we go. Show you this. There are the databases that we've created up here. You'll notice those. But I've also got some views in the Lake database called contact underscore partitioned. See those right here? And these views right here are hourly snapshots. So if I run into cases where I'm getting read-write contention going on, but because somebody's trying to write to the lake at the same time I'm trying to read from it, if I get into a case where that's becoming an issue, I can go over and use the partition view. So it's an hourly snapshot of the data, and I've got full read control. I'm not going to run into contention on that. So if you have that, that is a possibility that's available, and so that's available for us. So that's a new feature that was added a couple months ago. With that, I think I'm hitting the sort of the gist of what I wanted to cover, and want to see if there's any other questions or anything I can serve up, as well as I'm going to make sure that I have give you visibility into all the resources, and I'll put them again in the links of the show notes available as well. Ted, what do you think?
That was great. I learned a lot.
See, you're unmuted there, buddy.
At one point, you used the term "peace out." I thought you were trying to connect with the younger generation there. I don't think you meant peace out like they mean it, but
yeah,
I learned a lot. And a lot of comments I see is other people learned a lot. Even Alex.
Anybody else on the team?
Yeah, I think your
Daniel?
I think your tab might be muted.
Buddy, it's me. I was the one.
There you go. There you go.
My bad. Sorry, Ted.
Go ahead.
Everybody else could hear you. I just had you muted, buddy.
It's okay. We were saying wonderful things about you.
Well, I'll take that, but my bad. I couldn't hear you.
I just wanted to thank you, definitely, Scott and Ted. Thank you very much. I wanted to just remind everyone who's viewing to check out the community gallery and make sure to ask your questions here for Scott and for Ted. Right there, aka.ms/devcamp comment. And you can also check out our Power BI community gallery for past episodes of DevCamp and things like that. Yeah, that's sort of what I have to say. And make sure to tune in next month. Yeah. Anything, Scott or Ted, you want to plug?
A little teaser for next month. There, so I did a session on React and basically developing for Power BI embedding with React.js. But a little while ago, the people that created React gave us a whole new way using functional components and using hooks. So the next month's session is going to be, basically modern React development for Power BI embedding. So hopefully for those that are building front ends for Power BI embedding solutions, next month we'll have a pretty good installment for you. And also, let me just say once again, thanks to Scott for coming and filling this month with some great content.
Thanks for the invite.
Awesome. Thank you both again. Make sure to tune in next month and have a great one. I love this picture. This is fantastic. All right, everyone.
That's right.
Have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. See ya.